Hello, everyone. Welcome to another BRAP Basement Radio Arcade podcast. This is very impromptu, by the way. I was planning on doing the regular scheduled BRAP tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, but unfortunately, I forgot I had a schedule conflict this evening, so I can't do BRAP tonight. So I was like, okay, I have some time right now. I'll just do a BRAP during my lunch break, take an early lunch break, and discuss some of the more recent gaming-related news and controversy, because we do have some controversy. Seems like there's always controversy around all things video games, unfortunately. The Assassin's Creed, we'll talk about that, because, I see Twisted Sin already giving some, providing his perspective, his opinion on what's happening with the Assassin's Creed controversy. Yeah, no, you're right. Yusuke, he's actually in Assassin's Creed. And I think he's also in playable character in Samurai Warriors 5, which is also a Koei Tecmo game that released, I think, back in 2021, maybe? I don't remember the exact date. But we'll get into that. We'll discuss SquareEnix. They'll be going through some transformation the next 3 years. And so begs the question, will Final Fantasy be back on Xbox? And then we have big PlayStation 5 or big PlayStation related news in general. We'll talk about some of the leadership changes and PlayStation's financials. We're probably going to do more of a deep dive into the financials with David Falke, or I shouldn't say David Falke, that's not even his last name, David Faulkner, aka Falke, on BRAP, probably this weekend. I just need to check my schedule, coordinate a time with him, probably Saturday, some point Saturday. I don't know, probably later on in the day. But give me a follow on Twitter at BRAP_podcast, or also, if you haven't done so, please subscribe, hit the bell notification so you're alerted when we do go live. But give me a follow on Twitter if you haven't done so already. It's a great way to get up to speed or just keep your ear to program related news for the BRAP channel, BRAP podcast. And I will post something on Saturday regarding having Falke come on and kind of do more of a deep dive into the financials for PlayStation. And so, and please do me a favor, smash that like button if you haven't done so already. Helps people find the channel. And again, always appreciate the support. Big shout out to everyone in the live chat. Again, thank you so much for joining me in this very impromptu BRAP this morning. So let's see here. Bender Strings says, "What's up, BRAP?" What's going on, Bender Strings? Yes, this is the weekly podcast, BRAP, not BRAP, Bender Strings. I'm not going to be doing a show tonight because I have a scheduling conflict. And I won't be able to make tonight's show, unfortunately. So that's why I'm doing this very, very impromptu BRAP this morning. So Better Streets also says the controversy Twitter thread nonsense. 99.9% of gamers don't give a shit. I don't disagree with you, Bender Strings. I think things tend to get blown out of proportion a bit on Twitter. For whatever reason. Well, it's Twitter, I guess it wouldn't be Twitter if things weren't blown out of proportion. So we'll talk about the Assassin's Creed thing here as well. So let's discuss. There is some news. There's some reports coming out from Jez Corden at Windows Central. Jez is claiming that more Xbox first-party titles are currently in development for PlayStation. That's not really a surprise to me. I don't think that this is going to stop at 4. I've said that, we've said this on the show many times, that they weren't going to stop at just 4 titles. The acquisition of ABK has really changed the dynamics internally at Microsoft. And as we have said on this show, Amy Hood wants her money back. That's a very, very generic way to put it. But that's There needs to be immediate ROI. So Jez is saying that more upcoming Microsoft-owned games, Xbox first-party games, are in development for PlayStation under the code name Latitude. So now we know what the internal name for this. Excuse me. So now we know what the internal name is for this initiative internally at Xbox. Jez did also, he didn't really go into detail on what exactly the games that are going to be released on PlayStation. He did say that they're potentially obvious games you'd most likely expect. Begs the question, could Halo be one of these games? I wouldn't surprise me to see Halo on PlayStation. We talked about it on this show. Live service multiplayer games, those games don't make sense. It doesn't make sense to have those kind of games, those games of service, live service, multiplayer games that thrive off a community, to be exclusive to a particular platform. It's why you see Helldivers 2, which is having tremendous success for PlayStation, for Sony in particular. But that's why you see a game like Helldivers 2 released on PlayStation and PC. All right, so Jez also reports that the new change in strategy revolves around Satya Nadella and CF Amy Hood's mandate to increase every department's margins, and the company is taking a no red line approach to what games could make the change. So again, this is coming top down from Amy Hood, from Satya. I know if you listened to the show last week. Game Logic had actually asked me who I thought was responsible for some of these changes, and I said, "Hey, look, it's Amy Hood. This is coming from Amy Hood." One game that Corden Corden's mentioning Halo. I just mentioned Halo, so as I'm reading this article here, I mentioned Halo. So Jez is actually saying. One of the games mentioned that he's mentioning as a possibility is Halo. Again, nothing officially confirmed in that regard, but again, it sounds like, and as we've talked about here on this show, that they in fact are going to be more games coming to PlayStation. Again, I'm not surprised by this. I don't think anyone should be surprised by this, to be honest with you. Like, why would you be surprised by this? Just given the trajectory of hardware, and we'll talk about the Z Huge actually had some interesting data points with regards to Xbox hardware sales. If you contrast the hardware sales to what PlayStation 5 is doing, it just doesn't surprise me that they would bring more games. I've said this on the show on numerous occasions. Ricardo says BRAP Halo is not coming to PlayStation. Ricardo 117, why don't you think Halo is not coming to PlayStation? If the end goal, and if you, it's fair if you sounds like you disagree with what Jez Corden is reporting. But why don't you think, Ricardo, that Halo is not coming to PlayStation? Why wouldn't, I mean, what's the incentive? What is, considering the struggles that Microsoft's having in terms of selling hardware, that the Game Pass subscription model has kind of stalled out. Why do you think that they're? I mean, ABK is essentially towing the line in terms of revenue for the rest of the gaming business. Why do you think it's not coming, Ricardo? I'm just curious to hear what your, why you think they wouldn't do that. All right. So again, like I said, like given all those things that we just mentioned, declining hardware, Game Pass subscription stalling, the debt assumed by acquiring ABK, none of this surprises me that they're going to And when we had Mag on last week, he talked about kind of the internal civil war at Xbox. And again, I think they're operating as a third-party publisher, which is fine. I mean, look, Microsoft has a lot of, and I said this last week, they have some very valuable IP. Minecraft, Candy Crush, Call of Duty. I mean, they are a publishing juggernaut right now in the gaming industry. The Ultimate Hero, the Shadow Link Dragon Wolf King, that's a very long name, says it could be Halo, Starfield, Gears, Redfall, Indiana Jones, Blade, Avowed, from what Xbox era and others I mentioned before. I think it's all those. I think it's all of the above. I think it's all those games. I think all those games will eventually come to PlayStation at some point, in my opinion. For the reasons I just mentioned, with declining hardware and all the other stuff that we talked about in length on this show. So, all right, I want to get back. I want to go to the Assassin's Creed controversy. It's so ridiculous. People are angry, always upset. So, Assassin's Creed Red. It is. That is the name of the next Assassin's Creed, or I'm sorry, that was the name of the project. Assassin's Creed Shadows will be the game. I'm sorry, Assassin's Creed Red was the working title, but now it's Assassin's Creed Shadows. So the main protagonist is Yusuke. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I wish I had created Kofi on. He could confirm whether or not I'm pronouncing the name correctly. And people are upset that we have a black protagonist here. And it's just like, why? I saw someone say, oh, they're doing an adaptation of a video game set in feudal Japan. There should be Asian representation. As if there won't be any Asian representation, right? As Yusuke himself, based on history, actually acting like that he didn't actually live in Japan, or that he didn't, or that he wasn't, or that he wasn't, that he wasn't someone who worked, or did I say worked for Oda Nobunaga. I mean, like there's a lot of history here. My understanding of the history of Yusuke, that he was a vassal under Oda Nobunaga, which, by the way, Nobunaga's Ambition is one of my favorite like NES games from many, many years ago. I don't know if anyone recalls Nobunaga's Ambition. But it's just the outrage about this is just disappointing. Now, there is a Netflix anime series about Yusuke, which is good. I would recommend it. If you haven't watched it, watch it. But yeah, I mean, there's history here. There's some historical documentation. And I know people argue, oh, he really wasn't a samurai. He was just a vassal of Nobunaga. Well, he actually did fight under Nobunaga's banner and actually fought alongside Nobunaga's son after Nobunaga was, I think he was betrayed. I don't remember all the history with Nobunaga here. You think Nobunaga? I gotta look this up now. Yeah, okay, here we go. Nobunaga was ambushed by General Akechi Mususide. I don't know if I'm not even pronouncing that correctly. And that ambush led to that led to Nobunaga committing suicide. He committed seppuku. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And then Yusuke went to go fight under Nobunaga's son, and was according to history, was actually injured in combat, and then was sent to a he was wounded in battle. And then apparently, according to history, he was escorted to a Jesuit mission house. And actually, that's where the Netflix series starts off, I believe, with that part of the, and just moving on from there. From if I remember correctly, Yusuke being injured and then being sent to the Jesuit mission, and then the Netflix anime series takes the takes the void of knowledge post 1582 kind of as a starting point in its opening scene. But people are upset about this. People are arguing history. Well, was he a samurai? Was he not? Well, we know he fought. We know he carried weapons. We know that Nobunaga spoke to him a lot. And again, this is historical. This is called a documentation, historical documentation. But I mean, people getting upset that about a black protagonist in this game is just ridiculous. And look, if it bothers you that much, just play another game. Play another game. If you feel like, oh, well, there's not enough. It's set in feudal Japan. There's no real Asian representation here. Go play Ghost of Tsushima. Go play Ninja Gaiden. Go play something else. You have choices. You don't have to play this game if it bothers you that much. And for crying out loud, it's a video game. Scott Dove says probably the same people upset about Stellar Blade being censored. Zero Steel, why is it awkward? How is black and feudal Japan though? How is that awkward? We know there were Spanish missionaries in feudal Japan. We know there were other ethnicities in feudal Japan. What's the issue? Because I can't recall a black person in feudal Japan. Well, Zero Steel. Here's the thing. There's this tool. There's even. Did you study feudal Japanese history? Zero Steel. Did you study that in school? I mean, look. Maybe you didn't, Zero Steel, and if you didn't study that, that's fine. I mean, you did study it. I mean, like a quick Google search will yield this information. I mean, I guess, and I'm not picking on you, Zero Steel. I think what I always encourage people is look. If you're hearing conversation around, in this case, if you're hearing conversation around the protagonist in this particular Assassin's Creed game, Yusuke, then use the internet to kind of do your own research and see if this in fact is historically accurate. Because everything that I've read and everything I've read prior to the people flipping out about Yusuke being the protagonist in Assassin's Creed. Wooden Stove says Yusuke wasn't a samurai. You need a surname to be a samurai. Wooden Stone, I've read a varying difference of opinions on that you don't have to be a sir to be a samurai. or have a surname to be a samurai. What we do know is that he did fight and was wounded in combat. But people, and let's just say, for argument's sake, he wasn't a samurai. So what? Like, how does that make how does that ultimately, at the end of the day, make the game less enjoyable? We do know that he was a respected figure by Nobunaga. BB says Sir Elton John the Samurai. Oh my goodness. But for what I've read, Wooden's Throne, that the surname is not necessarily. I've read that it's not necessarily, you didn't have to have a surname to be a samurai. I've read that as well. Now, again, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that I've also read something to the contrary. But here's the thing. Even if he wasn't a samurai, so what? How does this impact your enjoyment of the game? I mean, I just don't understand why people are upset about this. It's a video game. Like, I don't understand why. I don't understand why this is an issue for some people. Well, actually, I shouldn't say I don't understand. I in parts I do understand. But again, at the end of the day, like who cares? Like, I don't understand why this is such an issue for some people. And if it bothers you that much, just don't play the game. Marquise Remy says, how do we get here? Game's supposed to be fun. Who cares what the protagonist is? I don't disagree with you. And I think this is just another example of some of this is racism. Some of it is that. But I again, just don't play it. All right, I want to move on from the Assassin's Creed stuff because Bender Street says video games, not National Geographic. Yeah, I don't disagree. All right, I want to move on to Final Fantasy. So Square Enix is actually putting together a 3-year plan for rebooting long-term growth, and this involves them rethinking across all platforms of the business. And for them, the highlight is a shift to multi-platform strategy. And they're going to aggressively pursue this strategy. They're going to aggressively pursue this strategy that includes Nintendo platforms, PlayStation, Xboxes, and PC. And I'm reading this off of an article by IGN, written by Wesley Yin-Poole. And I'm just picking pieces out of the article here for the sake of saving time. But interesting, they mentioned Nintendo platforms. Interesting, platforms. Huh. I'd imagine that would include the Switch and the successor to the Switch. Wesley goes on to report, as part of the multi-platform push, Square Enix said it would build an environment where more customers can enjoy our titles in regards to major franchises and AAA titles, including catalog titles. The suggestion in all this is mainline Final Fantasy games will ditch PlayStation exclusivity going forward. Although Square Enix is yet to announce specifics beyond Final Fantasy XVI's upcoming launch on PC. There's also a shift from quantity to quality, Square Enix said, in a bid to deliver ensured fun. Square Enix has been accused of pumping out too many Final Fantasy games in too short a time frame, so perhaps this means release of major Final Fantasy games will be spaced out a bit more. Oh no, Ricardo, it is some of the stuff I've been reading. It is racism. It is racism. Ricardo, you didn't respond to why you think Halo won't be coming to PlayStation. All right, so the conversation is because of what Square Enix is. This came out of their recent financial reports. And I see people say, "Oh, they're going third party," but they've always been third party, with the select few titles being exclusives. And they've also had, and there's a bit of hyper focus on Sony exclusives. Square Enix has released many exclusives has released exclusives on the Switch as well, on Nintendo. But I'll say, like, Capono says, some say Square doesn't need to make these games 90 hours long. I don't disagree with you, Capono. I'm playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and I'm like, oh, this game's getting a little too long in the tooth. Not every game needs to be 90 hours. Just throw that out there. Look, don't get me wrong. If it's a good game, I'll play it, but I don't think every game needs to be 70, 80, 90 hours long. Zero Steel says they were third party. It's just that Sony funded 7 Remake and Rebirth. That's actually a great point, Zero Steel. Sony did help fund the development of that game. I guess here's what I was thinking about, and I was thinking about the potential release of Final Fantasy on Xbox. And I'm not so sure that even still makes sense. And here's why. Final Fantasy 15 was released on the Xbox One, and Xbox One sales of that game accounted for about 10% of all Final Fantasy 7 sales, meaning that, and 10% on PC. So 80% of all Final Fantasy 15 sales were on the PlayStation. I mean, and then it'll release Final Fantasy 16 on the Xbox, and you would imagine because of the numbers that Final Fantasy 15 did on the Xbox. Now they are releasing on PC, but again, they know the numbers. They have the internal data. They're probably looking at the Xbox platform and thinking of 16. Think, okay, release 15. It didn't do well. Maybe that's not a platform that release Final Fantasy on. There's just not demand for that product on that platform. Different consumers, et cetera, et cetera. So now they want to release. Now they potentially are they thinking about releasing the Final Fantasy on Xbox? Does it make sense? And I'm not so sure it makes sense because again, additional development cost to release Final Fantasy on if they release a Final Fantasy on the Xbox Series S and X. Those are two different hardware SKUs. Additional money, costs associated with releasing for different platforms. We've talked about this on the show. I think if they're selling retail on Xbox, that just doesn't make sense to me. If they're saying Final Fantasy 16 didn't meet numbers on PlayStation, okay? I'm going to have to go back and look at this report here. This is per IGN. Again, Wesley and Pool's reporting on financial call reported by Bloomberg. Square Enix president Takashi Kiryu told analysts that sales for all three games failed. He's talking about Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy 16, and Foam Stars. Basically, the games failed to meet expectations. Square Enix announced launch sales of 3 million of Final Fantasy 16 after it went on sale in June 2023, but has yet to announce a follow-up figure since. According to Bloomberg, while this initial momentum was in line with expectations, sales have slowed. But Square Enix said it's confident Final Fantasy 16 can achieve its goal for an original 18-month sales plan. Square Enix does not release sales for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. They're saying that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth sales fell short of expectations, which, again, we don't know what those expectations are. But again, you would imagine, we know that Final Fantasy VII Remake did well, but again, you think about the timeline when that game was released. Also released on the PlayStation platform. What we also don't know is, did the investment Sony make offset, at least financially, did it offset Final Fantasy VII Rebirth not meeting its internal goals from a revenue perspective? So Abdi says Persona Yakuza got more popular when Sega bought those games to Xbox and PC. Square needs to learn from Sega. Maybe there's something to that, Abdi. But here's the thing, though, Abdi. The Persona and Yakuza were released on Game Pass. So I was having this conversation with Game Logic when the Square financials came out, and we both agreed that maybe, at least, we both agreed that maybe it did make sense to have a Final Fantasy game release retail into Xbox, and that doing so, we may end up having the same conversation about Square Enix 4 or 5 years down the road from now. But, and again, this goes back to those games historically haven't sold well on Xbox. I mentioned the Final Fantasy 15 numbers on Xbox. There's also the declining hardware sales that you have to contend with on Xbox. So if you think about it like this, like, if they didn't sell enough of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth or Final Fantasy 16 on a platform that has recently outsold this past quarter Xbox 4-1 and is probably at that tipping point, at least in the US, of outselling Xbox, well, probably globally now, probably outselling Xbox 3-1. If you're telling me that the Xbox is going to make up that difference, is going to have significant impact on Final Fantasy, that's a hard pill for me to swallow. Just given the fact that those games didn't hit Square Enix, and we don't know what Square Enix expectations were for those games. But if the Square Enix games, if the Final Fantasy games didn't meet the expectation on the higher install base, why would we assume that they would meet expectations on the Xbox, or the Xbox would fill some kind of gap? I mean, maybe. But I think, to Abdi's point about Persona and Yakuza, which were released on Game Pass, I think, in my opinion, I think the smart way to go with Xbox is just See if you can get them on Game Pass. Get that money up front from Microsoft to bring those games into Game Pass. Now, they've done that before. Square Enix has done that before. They did that with Dragon Quest XI. Now, I didn't get a chance to see what kind of knock-on effect Game Pass had on Dragon Quest XI, but there is a precedent there of Square Enix releasing a big title, one of their bigger franchises, on Game Pass. And they just recently brought Final Fantasy XIV to Xbox as well. Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. The new Yakuza game's not on Game Pass. But my point was, you talked about like building that brand on Xbox. Those games hit Game Pass before the new Yakuza came out. I want to grab the super chat from Edwidge22. The $5 super chat, thank you for that. Says, why blaming Sony or Square Financial when Nintendo have more Square Enix exclusives than PlayStation? Yeah, I mean, I mentioned that earlier. Nintendo does have more exclusives, but those are the big tentpole IPs for Square Enix. I can kind of understand why people, I do understand why people would focus on that, because those are the bigger titles in the Square Enix portfolio. Zone Detiel says Crisis Core sold in less than 10,000 copies on Xbox. SC lost money on Xbox. Yeah, that's true. And I forgot about Crisis Core. They did release Crisis Core on Xbox. They've released Final Fantasy games on Xbox before. There's a history there, but my question is, with the declining hardware numbers on the Xbox side of things, I mean, people are acting like that's an automatic win, meaning that's going to somehow, push the Final Fantasy games over that threshold. And I don't know if that's true based on how previous Final Fantasy games have performed on the Xbox. And given that if you have the install base of one platform that's 3-to-1 of the other, and it didn't meet expectations on that platform with the higher install, is the console with the lower install, are you gonna have a good ROI there? I don't know. I don't think so. I could be wrong. Bonus says Xbox gamers will definitely buy COD though. Yeah, I absolutely think they will. But I think, in my opinion, again, I think the smart play for Square Enix would be to bring that game to Game Pass. Get the money up front. Offset that risk as much as possible. Scott says, like I said, I don't think they're talking about Xbox. I mean, they mentioned Xbox. Let me go back to this report. I don't know if Xbox was... Yeah, so they did mention Xbox, PC, PlayStation. They mentioned Xbox as well. Square did. The Capoto, no worries. You're not. It's fine. But we have about 122 people here watching. Please smash that like button if you haven't done so already. So, and I apologize if I'm rambling on here. I haven't had coffee this morning. Addy says, people need to stop acting like selling games on Xbox is a death sentence. Abdi, I don't know. I've never used the word death sentence here. So I don't know about the other people that you're referring to, but we do have data that shows that, like if you look at Capcom's financials, the Xbox gamers don't buy a lot of games and the same volume of PlayStation games. And I'd have to go back, and I think we've talked about this on the show, Abdi. But publishers have to contend with Game Pass now. And I don't think it's so much a death sentence, Abdi, as much as it is it's a harder sell on that platform, given that you have to contend with Game Pass, given the fact that you have to contend with a declining hardware install base. But I mean, like Abdi, you can't. Like, I don't think we can look. I don't think we should skate by those. You know, those realities. I mean, those are real things. Those are real challenges. I mean, again, like I said earlier, Abdi, like if you can't meet your target, and we don't know what the target is for Xbox Series X. I mean, for Final Fantasy on PlayStation 5, but if you can't meet your targets on the platform that has a higher install base that's outselling the competition Xbox 3-1, I mean, how well do you think that game's going to do on Xbox? And just like you said, and so that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think anyone's saying it. I've never said it's a death sentence, but I do think that it's a harder sell on the Xbox because of those two things I just mentioned: Game Pass, declining install base. Xbox has sold what, 20, 25, 27 million consoles worldwide. Maybe less than 27. I have to go back and look at the numbers. But we know that PlayStation 5 is about 60 million. So I mean, those are the dynamics. Those are things that that publishers would have to take into consideration. And again, Abdi, like we had reporting for Christopher Dring coming out of GDC. Publishers are questioning even supporting Xbox. Why would they support Xbox? Again, I mean, and that's not to bash Xbox. That's not to say Xbox is a bad platform. That's just a commentary on what publishers are saying based on the market dynamics and how the Xbox hardware is performing. But anyway, back to my point. I do think that the smart play, in my opinion, would be for Square Enix to put those games onto Game Pass. What's up, Brian East? All right, let's see here. I need to pull up. So, as I mentioned, we're probably going to have David Faulkner on Falky this Saturday. We're going to have him on to really do more of a deep dive into the Sony financials. Lord knows I won't attempt to do that because I am not a financial analyst. Falky is, though, which is why we have him on the show. Yeah, but Zero Steel, like I guess my point, if they... But they will get money up front for putting it on Game Pass. The question is if that money is going to be enough for them to put it on Game Pass. I mean, Abdi, I mean, yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I think this again, Abdi. I think that the smarter play is Game Pass. You get that money up front from Microsoft. I don't know. I just think it's going to be a tough sell. I go back to if they didn't meet their targets on the platform that's outselling the Xbox 3-1. Why would we think that it would do better on the Xbox or sell at a rate on Xbox that would make sense for Square Enix? I mean, again, this is all I'm speculating here by saying that Well, I'm just giving you my opinion that as to why I think they should put the games on Game Pass. Now we'll see what they decide to do. I just don't think it's gonna. I think Game Pass is the better option for Square Enix, in my opinion. You get the money up front, as opposed to crossing your fingers that the game is going to sell enough to make it worth your while to release the game on Xbox. I mean, they're going to get less sales on Xbox because of the install base than the PlayStation 5. I see people saying, I would ask Microsoft for $500 million up front for 6 months on Game Pass. I don't think Microsoft's going to cough up $500 million to get Final Fantasy in there. All right, so we did get Sony's FY 23-24 earnings this week, and big shout out to Daniel Ahmad Z Huge, which we had Z Huge on the show a couple years ago. Would love to get him back on. I don't know if he's doing podcasts still. I mean, Capone, that I don't disagree with you. Like, Capone says some Xbox gamers don't buy a game because they assume eventually will be there to Game Pass. I don't disagree with you. I think Game Pass is a potential roadblock. Microsoft has trained some of their consumer base to not buy games. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw the tweet. There was somebody on Twitter who tweeted a indie developer was like, "Yeah, if you don't, you didn't release your game on Game Pass, it's going to fail." Oh, by the way, Zero Steel, again, I earlier I wasn't trying to pick on you. I was just saying, like, I just using the example of we're talking about Assassin's Creed. Like, I think we should, and this is everyone, myself included. If we hear things, we should, and those things are of interest to us, we should try to research those things. Is my point earlier in the show. I need coffee really bad, by the way, folks. All right, so I'm going to go back to Daniel Ahmed. Daniel Ahmed did a great job, Z Huge, summarizing their earnings calls, Sony's earnings call. Helldivers 2 has become Sony's fastest-selling title ever, having sold 12 million units in 12 weeks. It surpassed God of War, Ragnarok. PC was a large part of the success. Yeah, I believe the Helldivers 2 has actually sold most on PC. The digital ratio for full game software sales on PlayStation platforms reached 70% this year. So we're seeing that shift continue from digital to physical. Abdi says, I expect third-party publishers to want to make money on all platforms. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. The problem is, Abdi, or the challenge with the Xbox is that's a riskier proposition because of the declining install base. That's hard. And then you're competing with Game Pass. And I'm not saying that third-party publishers are going to stop supporting Xbox. I know someone's going to think that that's what I mean. That's not what I mean at all. My only point is that when you it just it is a riskier proposition. All right, go back to Z Huge's summary of the PlayStation financials. So you mentioned digital ratio for full game software sales on PlayStation platforms reached 70% for the full year. He says it's the end of the cyclical profit loss console cycle. He goes on to say in the past, declining software sales and high R&D costs would typically generate loss in console launch years. The PS4 to PS5 transition had higher margin digital content sales plus subscriptions, which equaled higher profits. He then goes on to say PlayStation 5 has sold 59.2 million units as of March 31st, 2024. Globally, he said this is slightly behind the PS4 in the time frame, which is the PS4 is 60 million. They do not expect PS5 to surpass PS4 in the next year. Again, that's globally. In the U.S., Matt Piscatella did mention that 41 months post-launch that the PlayStation 5 was 7 in the U.S. The PlayStation 5 is 7% ahead of PlayStation 4 and 66% ahead of PlayStation 3. Zhuge goes on to say, in other words, while console hardware sales are healthy at Sony is unable to sell more than the prior gen. That's why there's been huge focus on increasing ARPU, average revenue per user for console users, and also embracing a beyond console strategy, PC, etc. This is what companies typically do in mature markets. This is what we're going to see in the mobile market. I discussed the Morgan Stanley analysis of the mobile market being a mature market. It's one of the things Morgan Stanley said needs to happen in the mobile space as well. I want to grab the super chat here. Dr. Killshot with a $5 super chat says, "Great show, BRAP. Is this more of a play for games on PC makers, more sense of closers that gap on other platforms, or that pays for games?" Oh, is this makes more sense to close that gap on other platforms? I'm not sure what you mean there, Dr. Killshots. Are you talking about PlayStation? Or Square Enix saying, is this more of a play for games on PC? Makes more sense to close that gap on another platform, or that pays for games? ODG Gamer says, so Sony had 29% drops. Nintendo had 25% drop. Xbox, no one is buying hardware. So, a little more nuance than that. Toji Gamer. By the way, Toji is a great game. Christopher Drink talked about this. PlayStation coming off very high of highs with PlayStation 5, which is why you see that 29% drop in the UK. By the way, the numbers that Toji Gamers has mentioned here, the 29% for Sony, drop for Sony, 25% drop for Nintendo, 30% drop for Xbox. That is in the UK. So Nintendo, no surprise, they've hit critical mass. You should expect to see declines in hardware because, as I said, they hit critical mass with Nintendo Switch. And so when you see the Nintendo Switch 2 release, it's going to boost hardware numbers up probably quite a bit, I would imagine. It's going to be an injection of units sold in hardware in the market, right? Like Matt Pizzarella has kind of talked about that. Like, yeah, the console game market could really use a Nintendo Switch right now. The Xbox One's kind of interesting because, at this point in the console gen, you wouldn't typically see those declines. So, the console declines are a bit different in that regard. Nintendo's hit critical mass. There just seems to be less demand for the Xbox. Sony, was selling gangbusters, and you're not going to maintain that selling gangbusters forever. And so they've sold quite a bit, and now that's why you see that decline. And even with that decline, Toji Gamer, they barely missed their mark of, I think it was 21 million PlayStations in Q3, and that ended to be like 20.8 million PlayStation 3s or PlayStation 5s sold. Daniel Med says he also Zhuge says also coming out of the financials here. PlayStation 5 shipped 4.5 million units in the last quarter. I'm sorry, I think they sold 20 million units for the year. I said the quarter. I think it was for the year, and they were estimating 21, which is still insane. PlayStation 5 has shipped 4.5 million units in the last quarter, according to our estimates. Z-Huge goes on to say this is almost 5 times more than the Xbox Series X and S shipped in the same period. So there are some numbers out there suggesting that the Xbox actually shipped 800,000 units in its last quarter compared to Sony's 4.5 million units. That speaks to demand. So as I mentioned, we're gonna have Falky on this weekend, and we're gonna dive a bit deeper into these numbers. But overall, I mean, the hardware sales for PlayStation seem, as Z Huge said, they're still pretty healthy. So we'll see if they'll be able to outsell the PlayStation 4, which is kind of interesting because, at this point in the gen, last console generation, remember, we did get that $100 price reduction when the PlayStation 4 Pro came out. I don't know if we'll see that this time around. And I'm wondering if that's part of the reason why, we're not seeing the kind of. I think it's still impressive for Sony to be selling that much at a $500 price point, or $450 price point. But depending on which model PS5 you get, but I think about when the PlayStation 4 Pro released, there was $100 price difference or reduction in price for the base model PlayStation 4. You have to imagine that helps sales to the PlayStation 4. Maybe we don't get that this generation. We'll see what happens when the PlayStation 5 Pro is released. Oh, don't worry, Dr. Killshot says I'm in my car phone. The reference was to SquareEnix going multi-plat, but it making more sense to release on PC since they can actually sell to a larger user base versus Xbox. Okay, I see what you're saying now. Zero says, yeah, BRAP, expect that price cut happening. I mean, that would certainly help boost sales, but I don't know. And I want to say, and this is something I need to ask Falky on Saturday. I think Falky had said something in the financials that kind of stood out to him. Something to the effect that we're not going to get a PlayStation 5 Pro anytime soon or not probably later in the year. But again, I mean, and I think maybe he had hinted that we may not see a price cut and that the PS5 Pro could come above $500. That might be him or might be someone else. Again, haven't had my coffee this morning. So again, I may be confusing Falky with someone else. Toji Game says Phil said hardware's not dropping in price. Did Phil say that about the Xbox Series console or? Yeah, I gotta get that coffee. Yeah, so that's gonna be interesting to see if they reduce the price when the PS5 Pro comes out. We'll see. Oh, all consoles. Maybe that's the case at Doji. Maybe Phil's right in that regard. Maybe we don't see a price drop. All right. Do you want to move on to and this? And I'll get into this is going to be another story news item that I cover a bit more on Saturday with Falky. And so Herman Hulst and Hideki Nishino will jointly succeed. This is per GameIndustry.biz. If you're not reading GameIndustry.biz for your video gaming news, you absolutely should. They are one of the last great bastions of gaming journalism. I mean, they are my go-to. And this is actually an article by Chris String, who I'm trying to get on the show. I'm going to tweet him again. We'll see if he'll join us. But per Chris String, Herman Hulst and Hideki Nishino will jointly succeed Jim Ryan as the CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment. Hulst is CEO of the newly named Studio Business Group, which includes all of PlayStation's first-party teams, plus covers the development of PlayStation IP onto other mediums, such as TV and film, which PlayStation's actually, they've had some success there in some of their TV adaptations of their video games, and The Last of Us, and what I thought was, what I didn't think I was going to like, Twisted Metal, but I actually did like the TV adaptation, the season 1 of Twisted Metal. Hulst was already head of PlayStation Studios. He was previously the co-founder of Horizon and Killzone developer Guerrilla Games, which was acquired by Sony in 2005. I did see Ryan McCaffrey make comparisons to Phil Spencer. I also did see people take Ryan McCaffrey to task on making that comparison. I could kind of see why Ryan might make that comparison in terms of two individuals kind of working their way up the ladder and finding themselves in CEO position, but their backgrounds are slightly a bit different in the sense that Herman Hulst actually did co-found Guerrilla Games, ran that studio, and we know that studio's cranked out the last couple of years and then moved into the role that he's in today. So Herman goes on to say, I'm thrilled to lead the Studio Business Group and continue to build our success with PlayStation 5 while preparing for the future. The video game industry is one of the largest entertainment industries in the world and has been built on the marriage of content and technology, and I look forward to continuing to push the boundaries of play and entertainment. Now, Hideki Nishino will lead the Platform Business Group, which includes console hardware, technology, accessories, the PlayStation Network, and third-party relations, covering major publishers and indie studios. He was already the SVP of Platform Experience. He's been part of the Sony business since 2006, holding numerous roles at Sony Network Entertainment, Sony Corporation, and SIE. Hideaki Nishino goes on to say, we will continue to connect players and creators through world-class products, services, and technology. We always strive to grow our community even bigger with innovation in every area at Sony Active. I can't even talk today. Again, I need coffee. Sony Interactive Entertainment. I'm honored to be appointed such an important role alongside Herman. By working more closely together, we'll be appointed to build incredible experiences for an ever-expanding audience now and the future. Now, both CEOs, Hideaki and Herman, will report to SIE Entertainment Chairman Hiroki Totoki, who has been, if you recall, he's been the acting CEO of the division since Jim Ryan stepped down at the end of March. So Totoki is also president, COO, and CFO of Sony Group Corporation. Totoki goes on to say, Sony Interactive Entertainment is a dynamic and growing business that delivers incredible entertainment experiences through the connection of content technology. These two leaders will have clear responsibilities and will manage strategic direction to ensure the focus remains on deepening engagement with existing PlayStation users and expanding experiences on new audience. Now, this idea of dual CEOs is kind of interesting. I've seen some conversation around, is this a good idea? Sometimes dual CEOs don't work. I think the concept of dual CEOs work in corporations that are large companies like Sony, right? But certainly needs to be a strong commitment partnership between both CEOs here. But I do think some of the potential upside to this is there's accountability. What I would say is just shared accountability. Both EEOs or EEOs. Like, again, I need coffee. Both CEOs are equally responsible for the company's performance and for the the groups that they're responsible for. obviously they each and I know there was some feedback, there's some discussion around the last two PlayStation CEOs being a bit burned out, having to juggle a lot of different responsibilities, and so this is kind of a way to address that. Let me see here. Yeah, I mean, Briney says also reflects how much work Jim Ryan has been doing at that point. Yeah, it absolutely does. And at least what it says to me, these are two very important pillars for PlayStation. And in my opinion, it seems that Totoki probably looks at assigning two CEOs to devote 110% of their attention to have a higher level of accountability by having these two CEOs in place. Yeah, that's what I was just saying. Yeah, more accountability, more direct focus. Yeah, I agree, Corey Mass. That's what I was just saying. Sorry, just reading just trying to keep up with the chat here. Some great conversation going on in the chat, by the way. Yeah, and sometimes dual CEOs they can make key business decisions a little more swiftly. And again, it's just I also think just kind of the dedication, the attention that like Corey just said in the live chat. I think this potentially allows Sony to really focus its efforts and resources really on multiple strategic fronts here, because you have these two CEOs in place that are 100% focused in these two different pillars for PlayStation. So we'll see if it works out, though. We'll definitely see if it works out. This is new for Sony, so I'm not saying this is a slam dunk, but we'll see if it works out. I'm just kind of highlighting some of the potential positives of having dual CEOs. All right, so as I mentioned, on Saturday, I don't have a time just yet, but we are going to have Falky on Saturday. I just need to figure out my schedule, and see what time we're gonna have the BRAP rant, and Falky's going to go to more of the financials of PlayStation, and we may discuss SquareEnix too, since they released their financials as well, but yeah, I would encourage every one of you to give me a follow on Twitter. If you're not following me already, BRAP_podcast. That's a great way to get updates on program relating matters to the BRAP podcast. I'll let you know. I always post when I'm going to go live, so it's a great way to get that. If you haven't done so already, subscribe, hit the bell notification. I wouldn't rely on the bell notification, though, because it doesn't work all the time. Oh, we have Hulk Hogan in the chat. What's up, brother? Hulk Hogan has graced us in the live chat. Big fan of yours, Hulk Hogan. The Hulkster has joined BRAP in the live chat. Well, let me tell you something, brother. Anyhow, I forgot I was saying. Yeah, so if you haven't done so, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you're alerted when we go live. And the bell notification doesn't always work. YouTube doesn't always alert you when I go live. So the best way to keep up to speed, to know when I'm about to go live or when we have upcoming shows, is to follow me on Twitter or X at BRAP_podcast. So I want to give a big thank you to everyone for joining me for the last hour or so. Thank you for joining me with this very impromptu BRAP. Again, I was planning on going live tonight, but unfortunately I have schedule conflicts for this evening, so wasn't going to be able to do a show, but I really did want to do a quick show to talk about some of the recent news items. And again, if you haven't done so, hit the like button. Helps out the channel. Helps people find BRAP. So thank you again, everyone. And please have a great rest of the day. If you have some time, fire up the gaming console or PC. Hopefully it's PC because that's the best gaming platform. Play some video games, but more importantly, have fun doing so. Thank you again all for the support, and we will catch you next time.